Jackpot. Malone always figured if the universe wanted to take him out, it'd at least make it quick. But when his rust bucket ship, the Lucky Leak, crashes into the crystalline jungle of Xytherian 9, he's not surprised, just annoyed. That is, until a sexy alien assassin shows up, pinning him down with her otherworldly charm and undeniable heat. Who is she? Why does she keep making his heart race? And can Jack survive this 3-day mess without completely losing control? Want to find out what happens next? Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the wildest, most electrifying moments between Jack and his alien temptation. Jackpot. Malone had a theory. If the universe was out to get you, it'd at least have the decency to make it quick. So when his rust bucket ship, the Lucky Leak, decided to nosedive into the crystalline jungle of Xytherian 9, he wasn't surprised, just annoyed. The hull screeched like a banshee on a bender as it plowed through a grove of quartz trees, shattering them into a symphony of tinkling shards. The impact flung Jack against the pilot's seat, his head smacking the console hard enough to see stars. Or maybe that was just the pulsar flickering through the cracked viewport. Perfect, he muttered, unstrapping himself with a groan. Another day, another near-death experience. At least the view's worth dying for. He wasn't wrong. Outside, Xytherian 9 sprawled in chaotic beauty, a rogue planet orbiting a pulsar, its surface a riot of neon colors. Electric purple vines pulsed with light, fiery orange rivers of molten amber carved glowing scars through the terrain, and icy blue crystal spires hummed faintly, reacting to every sound. The air buzzed with static, thick with the scent of ozone and something sweet like overripe fruit. Auroras danced across the sky, courtesy of the pulsar's radiation, painting the whole mess in surreal streaks of green and gold. Jack stumbled out of the wreckage, his boots sinking into the spongy, crystalline moss. At 30-something, he was lanky and unshaven, with a mop of brown hair that looked like it had lost a fight with a blender. His faded jumpsuit clung to him, patched with duct tape, and his backpack, stuffed with stale protein bars and a glitchy scanner, slapped against his back. He was an exobiologist by trade, a disaster by nature, and currently a castaway with 3 days to survive until a rescue drone found him. Assuming it didn't get lost, or shot down, or decide he wasn't worth the fuel. He tapped the scanner on his wrist, frowning as the screen flickered and spat static. "Come on, you overpriced paperweight," he grumbled, smacking it. The display stabilized for half a second, long enough to show a garbled map, then died again. "Great. I'm blind, broke, and probably about to be lunch for something with too many teeth." He sighed, running a hand through his hair, and started scavenging what he could from the wreck. A busted solar charger, a dented canteen, and, jackpot, a slightly crushed pack of protein bars. "Dinner is served," he said, tearing one open and gagging at the taste. Cardboard with a hint of despair. 5 stars. The jungle wasn't quiet. It thrummed, literally. The crystal trees vibrated with a low, hypnotic buzz, and the vines twitched like they were eavesdropping. Jack figured it was the pulsar's radiation screwing with the ecosystem, making everything a little too alive. He'd studied planets like this in Sims, but being here was different. It felt like the place was watching him, sizing him up. "Don't get any ideas," he muttered to a glowing fern that curled toward his boot. "I'm not on the menu." He'd barely made it 50 meters from the crash site when he felt it, a shiver down his spine, sharp and cold, like someone had dumped ice water on his neck. He froze, one hand on his canteen, the other fumbling for the scanner. "Okay, Jack, don't panic," he whispered. "It's just the wind. Or a bug. Or, His words died as a shadow flickered between the neon vines, too fast to track. His heart kicked into overdrive, but he forced a grin. Or a sexy alien assassin about to turn me into a kebab. Classic Tuesday. Then she appeared. Zyrethra didn't so much step out of the jungle as materialize from it, her form a sensual blur against the pulsing purple vines. She was ethereal, otherworldly, and Jack's brain short-circuited, hotter than a supernova. Her pale, almost translucent skin gleamed with a glossy, wet sheen, like she'd been dipped in liquid starlight. Her hourglass figure was jaw-dropping, narrow waist flaring into wide hips, a full, perky bust straining against a shimmering, dew-damp silk dress that hugged every curve like a second skin. A feather belt cinched her waist, silver indigo markings glowing faintly across her arms and thighs. Long, wavy silver hair cascaded down her bare back, pinned with a pink peony clip that looked absurdly delicate against her obsidian horns, which arced back from her head like a crown. Amber eyes with double pupils locked onto him, radiating a mix of affection and smoldering intensity. Delicate scales traced her cheekbones, and a glowing indigo tail flicked behind her with elegant menace. Jack blinked, then blinked again. Hi," he managed, voice cracking like a teenager's. She didn't answer, just tilted her head, studying him. Her tail swayed, brushing a vine that shivered in response. He took a step back, tripped over a root, and barely caught himself. Smooth, Jack. Real smooth. She moved fast. 1 second she was 10 feet away. The next she was on him, a blur of starlight and muscle. Her claws slammed into the crystal trunk behind his head, pinning him as her body pressed close. The heat of her hit him first, a wave of wild, earthy warmth that made his skin prickle. Her slick skin brushed his chest through his jumpsuit, her curves molding against him with a weight that was both terrifying and, oh God, thrilling. Her bust pressed hard, her hips digging into his, and her tail slid along his leg, the tip grazing his calf with a slow, deliberate scrape. Jack's breath hitched, his brain screaming danger while his body yelled yes, please. Her face hovered inches from his, her breath hot and sweet against his cheek, fangs glinting as she purred. You smell like prey. Jack swallowed, his mouth dry as a desert. And you smell like a foreplay? It was the dumbest thing he could have said, but his brain was too busy shorting out to care. Her amber eyes narrowed, a flicker of amusement dancing in them, and she leaned closer, her claws flexing against the bark. The pressure of her body was unrelenting, firm, slick, and way too real. He could feel every shift of her muscles, every curve sliding against him, and it sent a jolt of heat straight through him that he didn't know how to process. Look, he stammered, if this is about the crash, I swear I'll pay for the trees. With protein bars. She growled low, a sound that rumbled from her chest and vibrated through him, making his knees weak. Then, just as fast as she'd pinned him, she vanished, slipping back into the jungle like smoke. Jack stood there, panting, one hand braced against the trunk where her claws had gouged deep marks. Okay, he wheezed. Either I'm hallucinating or I just got hit on by the galaxy's hottest linebacker. What the hell is happening? He didn't have time to figure out. The jungle shifted around him, the vines pulsing faster, the air growing thicker. He grabbed his pack and started moving, muttering to himself to stay sane. Survive 3 days, Jack. That's it. Don't get eaten. Don't get seduced. Is that a thing here? He glanced back, half expecting her to pounce again, but the shadows stayed empty. For now. An hour later, he found a clearing near a molten amber river, its surface shimmering like liquid fire. He dropped his pack, wiped sweat from his brow, and started setting up a makeshift camp. Step 1, don't die. Step 2, figure out if that was a near-death experience or a really weird pickup line. He chuckled, but it sounded forced even to him. The scanner beeped weakly, picking up random heat signatures, probably just the river messing with it. He ignored it, focusing on rigging a tarp from the ship's debris. That's when he noticed the gift. A polished bone, carved with spiral patterns, sat neatly on his pack. Beside it, a skewer of steaming fruit, bright red and dripping with juice, let off a faint, musky scent that wasn't entirely natural. Jack stared, then sniffed the air. Oh no, he groaned. She's back, isn't she? He spun around, scanning the trees, but saw nothing. Just the hum of the jungle and that damn scent lingering like a tease. He picked up the bone, turning in his hand. It was smooth, heavy, and oddly warm. Okay, lady, he called out, voice echoing off the crystals. If this is your idea of flirting, you've got my attention. Now what? The vines rustled nearby, and Jack tensed, gripping the bone tighter. He wasn't sure if he was about to fight, flee, or, God help him, flirt back. Jack stood in the clearing, the polished bone still warm in his hand, the musky scent of Zyrethra's fruit skewer curling into his nostrils like a taunt. The molten amber river gurgled nearby, its glow casting eerie shadows across the crystalline moss. He squinted into the jungle, the neon vines twitching as if laughing at him. "All right, mystery lady," he said louder this time, tossing the bone up and catching it. "You got my attention. What's next? Dinner and a movie, or straight to the part where you eat me?" His voice bounced off the quartz trees, but the only reply was a low hum from the pulsing flora. He wasn't dumb enough to think she'd gone far. That shiver down his spine hadn't quit. It was sharper now, like a warning etched into his bones. He dropped the bone into his pack, grabbed the skewer, and took a cautious bite. The fruit burst against his tongue, sweet and smoky, with a kick that made his eyes water. "Huh," he muttered, wiping his mouth. "Not bad. Still don't know if it's a gift or a trap, but I'll take the calories." He slung his pack over his shoulder and started walking, figuring motion was better than standing around like a buffet sign. The jungle didn't let him relax. Every step crunched on glowing moss. Every rustle made him flinch. He kept talking, to himself, to the trees, to whatever might be listening. 3 days, he said, ducking under a vine that snapped at his hair. "Survive 3 days, Jack. Don't get eaten, don't get lost, and definitely don't get seduced by a 7-foot alien babe with a tail. Easy," he snorted. "Yeah, right. I'm already losing this fight." He made it maybe a kilometer. Hard to tell with the scanner fritzing, when the gifts started piling up. First, it was a coil of braided vine, tough as rope, left draped over a crystal stump. Then a jagged shard of quartz, polished to a mirror sheen, propped against a glowing fern. Each one carried that same scent, wild, earthy, and tinged with a sweetness that stuck in his throat. Jack stopped, hands on his hips, staring at the latest offering. Okay, this is either the weirdest scavenger hunt ever, or I've got a stalker with a crush. Which, honestly, tracks with my luck. That's when the air shifted, thicker, heavier, like the jungle was holding its breath. Jack's grin faltered. He turned slowly, scanning the shadows. And there she was again, Zyrethra, perched on a low crystal branch, her silhouette a hypnotic curve against the neon haze. Her dew-damp silk dress clung tighter now, soaked from the humid air, outlining every dip and swell of her killer figure. Her silver hair swayed, the peony clip glinting, and her indigo tail flicked with lazy elegance. Those double-pupil amber eyes pinned him, smoldering with something that made his stomach flip, half fear, half want. "Hi again," he croaked, raising a hand like an idiot. "Nice to see you're still terrifyingly hot." She didn't smile, just dropped silently to the ground, her movements fluid and predatory. Jack backed up, his boot catching on a root, but before he could fall, she was on him, faster than thought, a blur of starlight and muscle. This time, it was a full-on tackle. She hit him like a tidal wave, driving him down into the molten riverbank with a wet thud. The ground was soft, slick with amber mud, and Jack's back sank into it as her weight pinned him hard. Her hips slammed against his, grinding down with a force that knocked the air from his lungs. Her thighs, strong, smooth, and glistening, clamped around his waist, locking him in place. Her claws dug into the mud beside his head, caging him, while her bust pressed against his chest, the slick sheen of her skin sliding over his jumpsuit. The heat of her was overwhelming, a furnace of wild energy that seared through him. And her tail, God, that tail, coiled up his leg, the glowing tip pressing firm against his inner thigh, sending a shockwave of sensation that made his brain stutter. Jack gasped, his hands flailing uselessly before settling on her hips, pure reflex and a mistake. Her curves were solid yet yielding, the silk dress slippery under his fingers, and the feel of her made his pulse jackhammer. She leaned in, her face inches from his, silver hair spilling over his shoulders like a curtain. Her breath was hot, ragged, brushing his lips as she growled, "Stop running, soft skin." Then her tongue, long, warm, and deliberate, flicked out, tracing a slow, wet line along his jaw. The roughness of it, the possessive drag, sent a shiver down his spine, so intense he nearly bucked beneath her. He blinked up at her, dazed, his voice a shaky mess. "Is this a fight or a date? Because I'm getting really mixed signals here." Her growl deepened, rumbling through her chest and into his, a sound that was both threat and promise. She shifted, her hips pressing harder, her claws flexing as if itching to grab him tighter. Jack's brain screamed run, but his body, traitor that it was, stayed put, pinned under her weight and drowning in the raw, electric tension of her touch. "Your prey," she said, voice rough and feminine, laced with irritation and something softer. "Hurt, maybe? I chase. You run." "What?" Her tail tightened, sliding higher, the pressure bold and dangerous, teetering on the edge of too much. Jack's breath hitched, his hands twitching against her hips. Because I thought you were going to kill me," he managed, half laughing, half panicking. "Where I'm from, tackling someone in the mud isn't exactly a love letter." She blinked, visibly confused, then huffed, a sharp, exasperated sound that sent a puff of warm air across his face. "Fool," she muttered, rolling off him with a fluid twist, crouching beside him in the mud. Her tail flicked, splattering amber goo across his leg. Jack sat up, brushing muck from his hair, still reeling from the feel of her. Firm curves, slick skin, that damn tail. "Okay," he wheezed, "let's rewind. You're not trying to eat me." "No," she said, her amber eyes narrowing. "I court you." The words were blunt, broken, but carried a weight that hit him like a brick. She gestured to the gifts, the bone, the vine, the shard. "For you. Interest. You ignore." Her tone climbed, frustration bleeding through, and she threw her clawed hands up, muttering something in a guttural alien tone. Jack stared, his brain scrambling to catch up. Wait, court me. Like dating." He laughed, a nervous, barking sound. "So, stealing my socks and tackling me into mud is your version of Tinder? Lady, you're gonna need a better profile pic than scary hot jungle ninja." She tilted her head, clearly not getting the reference, but her lips twitched, almost a smirk. Her tail coiled around his ankle, tugging him closer, a slow, deliberate pull that made his heart skip. "Yes," she said, leaning in, her voice dropping to a purr. "You smell good. Strong. Soft-skinned but brave." Her claws brushed his arm, light but intentional, sending a ripple of heat through him. Jack swallowed hard, caught between laughing and bolting. "Okay," he said, "this is officially the weirdest day of my life. And I once got chased by a sentient cactus, so that's saying something." She stood, towering over him, her silhouette a sensual masterpiece against the glowing river. "Run again," she said, a challenge in her eyes, "and I chase harder." Then she was gone, melting into the jungle like a phantom, leaving Jack sprawled in the mud, her scent clinging to him like a promise. He dragged himself up, panting, and grabbed his pack. "Right," he muttered, wiping amber muck from his face. "Survive 3 days, don't get eaten, and apparently don't get married to an alien goddess. No pressure." He started walking, the bone and skewer tucked in his gear, her words echoing in his head. The jungle hummed louder now, and somewhere in the distance, a faint buzz cut through the air, mechanical, unnatural. Jack frowned, glancing up at the aurora-streaked sky, his scanner beeping weakly in his pocket. Jack trudged through the crystalline jungle of Zytherian 9-4104, his boots crunching on the glowing moss, the faint buzz of drones still nagging at the back of his mind. The amber river's glow flickered in his peripheral vision, and Zyrethra's scent, wild, earthy, and maddeningly sweet, still clung to his jumpsuit like a stubborn ghost. His head was a mess, spinning from her tackle, her words, and that damn tail. "Survive 3 days," he muttered, kicking a quartz pebble. "That's it. Not survive 3 days and dodge an alien supermodel who thinks I'm her prom date." He smirked despite himself, the absurdity of it all keeping him sane. Jackpot Malone, ladies and gentlemen, crash landing into the weirdest rom-com ever. The jungle didn't care about his existential crisis. The neon vines pulsed faster now, their electric purple glow syncing with the staticom in the air. The terrain was shifting, flatter, denser, the crystal trees giving way to floating platforms of jagged quartz that hovered over a foggy abyss. The ether abyss, he'd later call it, though right now it just looked like a death trap with better lighting. Amber rivers snaked through the haze below, their molten glow cutting through the mist like veins of fire. The pulsar overhead flared, sending random lightning bolts cracking across the sky, and Jack ducked instinctively. "Great," he grumbled. "Now the weather's flirting with me too." He'd barely caught his breath when Zyrethra melted out of the shadows again, her silhouette a sensual slash against the neon chaos. Her dew-damp silk dress clung tighter, soaked with jungle mist, outlining every curve, narrow waist, wide hips, that bust that defied gravity. Her silver hair swayed, the peony clip glinting, and her glowing indigo tail flicked with purpose. Those double-pupil amber eyes locked onto him, smoldering with a mix of irritation and something softer, something that made his gut twist. "You're back," he said, voice cracking. "Miss me already? Or was this round 2 of Pin the Human?" She didn't answer, just strode toward him, her hips swaying with lethal grace. Jack held up a hand, half joking, half pleading. "Look, I'm not saying I'm your knight in shining armor, but I've got duct tape and optimism. Can we talk before you tackle me again?" She stopped, tilting her head, her tail brushing a vine that shivered in response. "Talk," she said, her voice rough but curious, like she was testing the word. "Why?" Jack exhaled, slinging his pack off his shoulder. "Because I'm lost, you're confusing, and I heard drones back there. I'm guessing they're not here for the scenery." He pointed at the sky, where the faint buzz had grown louder, a mechanical whine cutting through the jungle's hum. Zyrethra's eyes narrowed, her claws flexing. "Novacor," she spat, the name dripping with venom. "They hunt me. Again. Again." Jack frowned, his brain kicking into gear. "Wait, who's Novacor? And why do they want you? I mean, besides the obvious." He gestured vaguely at her, then caught himself. "Not that I'm complaining about the view." She huffed a sharp sound and stepped closer, her scent hitting him like a punch, wild, sweet, and dangerously alive. "They took my pack," she said, her voice low raw. "Years ago. Cages. Needles. I ran. They want this." She tapped her chest, her claws grazing her glistening skin. "My blood. My strength." Jack's smirk faded. He'd heard of Novacor, Biotech Corp, ruthless, the kind that'd patent your DNA and sell it back to you. "So, you're their science project," he said, softer now. "And I'm the idiot who crashed into your backyard." She nodded, her tail flicking, and for the first time he saw past the fangs and curves, saw the weight in her eyes, the kind that came from losing everything. "Okay," he said, straightening up. "I'm in. Let's dodge these creeps together." "Deal." Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "Deal," she echoed, then turned, motioning him to follow. "My lair. Safe. For now." Jack grabbed his pack, muttering lair. "Cool. Totally not ominous." He trailed her, the jungle thickening around them, the platforms floating higher, the fog swirling thicker. The buzz of drones faded, but he knew it wouldn't last. Novacor wasn't the type to give up. They'd come, and soon. Her lair was a cave carved into a massive crystal spire, its walls shimmering with stalactites that glowed soft blue. Inside, the air was cooler, the hum of the jungle muffled. Bones and vines littered the floor, a nest of sorts, and a small amber pool bubbled in the corner, casting a warm light. Jack dropped his pack, whistling. "Nice digs. Cozy, if you ignore the serial killer chic vibe." Zyrethra ignored him, crouching by the pool, her tail curling around her legs. "They burned my pack," she said, staring into the water. "Took the week. Left me. I was cub then. Alone." Jack sat across from her, his chest tightening. "That's rough," he said, No quips this time. I'm sorry. No one should lose family like that. She glanced at him, her amber eyes softening, and for a moment, the predator was gone. Just a survivor, like him. You stay, she said, almost a question. Help me. He nodded, firm. Yeah, I'm not big on cages either. Let's mess with their plans. She stood, crossing the cave in 2 strides, and before he could react, she was on him, not a tackle, but close. Her body slammed into his, driving him back against the crystal wall with a thud. The impact rattled his teeth, but it was her heat that hit harder, wild, untamed, flooding his senses. Her hips pressed tight against his, digging in with a force that made his breath catch. Her thighs slid against his sides, slick and strong, pinning him as her claws scraped the wall beside his head. Her bust crushed against his chest, the wet sheen of her skin slipping over his jumpsuit, and her tail, damn that tail, wrapped around his thigh, the glowing tip pressing hard into the muscle, sending a jolt of raw, electric heat straight through him. Jack froze, his hands hovering, then landing on her waist. Big mistake. Her curves were firm, slippery under the silk, and the feel of her made his pulse race like a drum roll. She leaned in, her silver hair brushing his neck, her breath hot and ragged against his ear. Stay still, fool, she hissed, her voice a growl that vibrated through him. Her claws dug deeper into the crystal, flecks raining down, and her tail tightened, sliding higher, the pressure bold and dangerous, teetering on the edge of overwhelming. His body reacted before his brain could, heart pounding, skin prickling, a flush creeping up his neck. He stammered, voice shaky. This is either the best hug ever or the worst way to say thanks. She growled low, her lips grazing his ear. Not a kiss, but close enough to make him dizzy. You fight with me, she said, fierce but steady. No run. Jack swallowed, his hands twitching against her hips, the tension coiling tight. No running, he rasped. Promise. But, maybe ease up on the death grip? I'm fragile. She pulled back, just enough to meet his eyes, her amber gaze piercing. Fragile, she repeated, skeptical, then slid off him, her tail brushing his leg as she retreated. Jack slumped against the wall, panting, his head spinning from her touch, firm, slick, possessive. Right, he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Alliance formed. Now I just need to survive you. Outside, the jungle crackled, a lightning bolt splitting the fog, the buzz of drones creeping closer. Zyrethra's ears twitched, her posture shifting to alert. Jack grabbed his scanner, its screen flickering to life, showing blips moving in the abyss. Guess nap time's over, he said, standing. They're coming. You got a plan? Or do we wing it? She flexed her claws, her tail flicking, and headed for the cave's mouth, motioning him to follow. Jack followed Zyrethra out of the cave, his scanner clutched in one sweaty hand, the other wiping amber mud from his jumpsuit. The ether abyss sprawled before them, a labyrinth of floating crystal platforms shimmering in the bioluminescent fog. The air crackled with static, the pulsar's erratic flares painting the mist in streaks of green and gold. The buzz of drones was louder now, a mechanical growl slicing through the jungle's hum, and Jack's gut twisted. So, he said, forcing a grin, Nova Corps crashing our little honeymoon already? Rude. Zyrethra didn't reply, just crouched to the cave's edge, her silver hair swaying, her indigo tail flicking like a whip. Her dew-damp silk dress clung to her curves, the fabric glistening in the faint glow of the amber pool behind them. Her amber eyes scanned the abyss, sharp and unblinking, and Jack couldn't help but stare, not just at the danger in her posture, but the way her silhouette cut through the chaos, fierce and untamed. They're close, she said, her voice low, rough. Drones first, then men. Jack tapped his scanner, the screen flickering with red blips. 3, maybe 4, weaving through the platforms below. Yeah, I see 'em, he muttered. Persistent bastards. Any chance they're just here to sell us timeshares? She shot him a look, her double pupils narrowing, and he raised his hands. Kidding. Mostly. What's the play? Run or fight? She stood, her claws flexing, and pointed to a narrow path of hovering quartz slabs snaking through the fog. Move, she said. Fast. They bolted, Zyrethra leading with a grace that made Jack feel like a stumbling toddler. The platforms wobbled under his weight, each step a gamble as the fog swirled thicker, hiding the amber rivers below. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating predatory vines that snapped at their heels, their neon tips glowing hungry purple. Jack ducked one, nearly losing his balance, and yelped, "This place hates me more than my ex did." Zyrethra grabbed his arm, yanking him forward, her grip iron tight. "Focus, fool," she growled, her tail brushing his leg as she steadied him. They made it halfway across the abyss when the drone struck. A trio of sleek, black machines burst from the mist, their rotors whining, red sensors glinting like eyes. Jack swore, fumbling with his pack, but Zyrethra was faster. She leapt onto a higher platform, her claws slashing through the air. One drone veered too close. She caught it mid-flight, her body twisting as she slammed it into the quartz, sparks flying. The wreckage plummeted into the fog, and she landed beside Jack, panting, her chest heaving against the silk dress. "Nice," he said, breathless. "Remind me not to piss you off." The other two drones adjusted, their sensors locking on. Jack's scanner beeped wildly, and he shouted, "Incoming!" Before he could dodge, a plasma bolt sizzled past his head, singeing his hair. "Oh, come on," he yelled, diving behind a crystal outcrop. Zyrethra snarled, her tail lashing, and shoved him into a narrow crevice between two platforms, a jagged slit barely wide enough for one. "Hide," she hissed, but the drones were relentless, their whirring closing in. She didn't wait for his protest. With a feral grunt, she threw herself against him, her body slamming him deeper into the crevice. The impact knocked the wind from him, her weight a sudden, overwhelming force. Her hips dug into his, pressing hard, the slick sheen of her skin sliding against his jumpsuit as she pinned him to the crystal wall. Her thighs, smooth, powerful, clamped around his sides, locking him in place, while her claws scraped his arms, digging into his flesh with a possessive grip that sent a jolt of pain and heat racing through him. Her bust crushed against his chest, the wet silk slipping over him, and her tail coiled tight around his thigh, the glowing tip pressing into the muscle with a slow, deliberate grind that made his breath catch in his throat. Jack's world shrank to her, her heat, her scent, the raw intensity of her touch. Her silver hair curtained his face, her breath hot and ragged against his neck as she growled, "Stay still, fool." The closeness was suffocating, electric. Every shift of her curves against him sparked a primal rush he couldn't ignore. Her claws tightened, drawing faint lines of fire on his skin, and her tail slid higher, the pressure bold and dangerous, teetering on the edge of too much. His hands, acting on instinct, grabbed her waist, fingers sinking into the slippery silk, and the feel of her firm, yielding flesh made his pulse hammer. "This," he rasped, voice shaky, "is either the best or worst way to die." Her amber eyes met his, inches away, smoldering with something wild. Anger, maybe, or need. "Quiet," she snapped, her lips brushing his ear, the roughness of her voice vibrating through him. A drone buzzed closer, its sensor beam slicing through the fog, and she pressed harder, her body molding to his like a shield. The heat of her thighs, the grind of her hips, the scrape of her claws. It was too much, too close, and Jack's brain short-circuited, caught between terror and a thrill he didn't want to name. The drone hovered, its beam flickering over the crevice, then veered off, chasing a false heat signature in the mist. Zyrethra held him there a moment longer, her breath slowing, her grip easing but not releasing. Jack exhaled, trembling, his hands still on her waist. "Okay," he muttered, half laughing. "You're officially too hot to handle." Literally. She pulled back, her tail unwinding from his thigh with a final, teasing scrape, and crouched beside him, her silhouette glowing faintly in the fog. "They hunt me," she said quieter now. "Not you. Yet." Jack slid out of the crevice, his legs shaky, his mind reeling from her touch. Firm, slick, overwhelming. "Yeah, well, I'm in this now," he said, brushing crystal dust from his jumpsuit. "No turning back after whatever that was." She smirked, barely, just a twitch of her lips, and stood, her tail flicking toward the path ahead. "Move," she said again, and Jack nodded, grabbing his pack. The platforms stretched on, the fog thickening until the amber rivers below were just faint smears of light. Lightning cracked again, illuminating a jagged vine that lunged from the mist, its neon tip snapping at Jack's ankle. He yelped, stumbling, and Xyrethra caught him, her arm locking around his waist, her bust pressing hard against his back as she yanked him upright. "Careful," she growled, her breath warm on his neck, and Jack muttered, "Yeah, dying's not on the agenda today." They kept moving, the drone's buzz fading but never gone, a constant hum beneath the jungle's chaos. Jack's scanner flickered, showing more blips, bigger ones, slower, moving in a grid pattern. "Foot soldiers," he said, frowning. "They're stepping up the game." Xyrethra's claws flexed, her posture tensing. "They want me alive," she said, her voice hard. "For cages. For blood." Jack glanced at her, his humor faltering. "Not happening," he said, firm. "Not while I've got duct tape and a pulse." She looked at him, her amber eyes searching, then nodded, a small, sharp motion. "Good," she said, and started down the path again, her tail brushing his leg as she passed. Jack followed, the weight of her trust settling into his chest, heavier than her tackle, but somehow steadier. The abyss loomed around them, the platforms creaking underfoot, and in the distance, a faint clank of metal echoed. Boots on crystal, closing in. Jack's boots skidded on the crystal platform as he followed Xyrethra deeper into the ether abyss, the clank of metal boots echoing behind them like a death knell. The fog clung to his skin, thick and shimmering, muffling the jungle's hum but amplifying every snap of a vine or crack of lightning. His scanner buzzed in his hand, the red blips multiplying, soldiers now, not just drones, fanning out in a grid that screamed, "We've got you." "Well," he muttered, ducking under a neon vine that hissed at him, "this is what I get for teaming up with the galaxy's sexiest fugitive. Should have stayed in bed." Xyrethra shot him a glance, her amber eyes glinting through the mist, her silver hair plastered to her back by the humid air. Her silk dress, still clinging like a second skin, shimmered with every step, outlining her killer curves, wide hips swaying, bust bouncing faintly with her stride. Her indigo tail flicked, brushing his leg again, and Jack forced his eyes up, muttering, "Focus, Jack." Death first, drooling later. She didn't slow, her claws clicking on the quartz as she led him across the floating slabs, her movements fluid despite the tension in her frame. "They're slow," she said, her voice rough. "Heavy gear. We outrun." "Outrun," Jack panted, nearly tripping as a platform wobbled. "I'm a scientist, not a marathon runner. My cardio's all you can eat tacos and panic." She growled low, grabbing his wrist and pulling him along, her grip bruising but steady. The contact jolted him, her heat, her strength, and he stumbled after her, the clank of boots growing louder, punctuated by shouts in clipped corporate tones. Novacor wasn't playing anymore. The abyss twisted around them, the platforms narrowing into a jagged gauntlet. Amber rivers glowed far below, their molten light bleeding through the fog, and predatory vines lunged from the edges, snapping at their heels. Jack yelped as one grazed his ankle, drawing a thin line of blood. "This place is a freaking obstacle course from hell," he shouted, but Xyrethra didn't flinch. She slashed the vine with a claw, its neon tip shriveling, and kept moving. Lightning cracked again, illuminating her silhouette against the pulsar's wild auroras, and Jack thought, not for the first time, that she was too damn beautiful for a place this deadly. They hit a wider platform, a brief respite, and Jack doubled over, hands on his knees, sucking in air. Okay, he wheezed. We're alive. For now. Any chance we can just hide in a tree and let them get bored? Zyrethra crouched beside him, her tail curling around her legs, her eyes scanning the fog. No hide, she said sharp. They track me. Blood. Scent. She tapped her chest again, her claws grazing her glistening skin, and Jack's stomach sank. Great, he muttered. So you're a walking GPS for evil corp fantastic. Before she could reply, the platform shuddered, a low, grinding groan that sent Jack staggering. What the? He started, but Zyrethra's ears twitched, her posture snapping to alert. The fog parted, and a shadow loomed. A hulking figure in matte black armor, a Novacore merc, his rifle raised. Target acquired. The man barked into a comms unit, his voice flat, mechanical. Jack's heart leapt into his throat. Oh, crap, he said, scrambling for his pack. But Zyrethra was already moving. Fast, feral, a blur of starlight and fury. She tackled the merc, her claws raking his armor. But another soldier emerged from the mist, firing a plasma dart that grazed her shoulder. She snarled, staggering, and Jack shouted, "No," without thinking. The dart hit the platform, sizzling, but its tip had nicked her. Dark blood trickled down her arm, staining her silk dress. The mercs advanced, and Jack's brain kicked into overdrive. All right, jackpot, he muttered. Time to be a hero or a corpse. He lunged for his pack, yanking out a solar charger, busted but still sparking, and chucked it at the second merc's feet. It hit the quartz with a crack, spitting a burst of electricity that made the man stumble. Zyrethra seized the moment, slamming the first merc into the platform's edge, his rifle clattering into the abyss. But she was slowing, her breath ragged, her movements faltering, and Jack saw the dart's poison spreading, her arm trembling. Hang on, he yelled, sprinting to her side. The platform buckled again, a jagged crack splitting its surface, and Jack grabbed her waist, hauling her back from the edge. She was heavy, solid muscle and curves, and her weight nearly toppled him. Come on, badass, he grunted. We're not dying here. She growled, weak but defiant, and leaned into him, her claws digging into his shoulder for support. The mercs shouted, their comms crackling, but the fog swallowed their words as Jack dragged her toward a sloping crystal ramp leading down into the mist. They slid, half-controlled, half-chaos, down the glowing slope, the quartz slick underfoot. Zyrethra's body pressed hard against his back, her bust crushing into him, her thighs sliding along his sides as they skidded. Her claws raked his arms, anchoring her to him, and her tail whipped around his waist, the glowing tip pressing tight against his hip with a desperate, possessive grip. The friction was brutal, her slick skin grinding against his jumpsuit, her heat searing through him, and Jack's breath hitched, a raw, dizzying rush spiking through his veins. Her silver hair tangled in his face, her breath hot and shallow on his neck, and he could feel every shudder of her wounded frame, every pulse of her strength fading. They hit the bottom hard, tumbling into a shallow amber pool, the warm liquid splashing around them. Jack rolled onto his back, Zyrethra sprawled atop him, her weight pinning him down. Her hips dug into his, her thighs clamping his sides, and her claws sank into his chest, scraping through fabric to sting his skin. Her face hovered over his, amber eyes half-lidded, her breath a ragged pant against his lips. You fool, she rasped, her voice thick with pain and something fiercer, gratitude, maybe or more. Her tail slid along his leg, weaker now, but still pressing, still claiming, and the heat of her body, slick, trembling, alive, sent a jolt through him that was equal parts adrenaline and what. Jack coughed, his hands gripping her waist, fingers sinking into the wet silk. Yeah, he wheezed, fool's my middle name. You okay? She nodded, faint, her claws flexing against him, and he felt her blood drip onto his chest. Warm, sticky, real. Gotta move, he said, pushing up, but she grabbed his shoulder, pulling him back down, her lips grazing his ear. You're mine, she growled, low and fierce. To protect too. The words hit him harder than her tackle, a promise wrapped in pain, and Jack's throat tightened. Mutual Protection Club, huh, he said, forcing a grin, but his voice shook. He slid out from under her, careful not to jostle her arm, and hauled her up, slinging her good arm over his shoulder. Come on, badass. Let's find cover before they send the whole damn army. She leaned into him, her weight heavy but trusting, and Jack staggered forward, the amber pool sloshing around his boots. The fog thickened, hiding them, for now. But the clank of boots echoed above, sharper, closer, and Jack's scanner beeped, its screen flickering with more blips than he could count. He half-carried, half-dragged her through the mist, the quartz slabs giving way to tangled vines and jagged outcrops. Stay with me, he muttered, his arm tight around her waist, her curves pressing into his side with every step. She growled softly, her tail brushing his leg, and Jack kept moving, the buzz of drones cutting through the fog again, their red lights piercing the haze like predator eyes. Jack staggered through the ether abyss, Xyrithra's arm slung over his shoulder, her weight dragging him down with every step. The fog swirled thick around them, a glowing shroud of bioluminescent mist that hid the amber rivers below but couldn't muffle the buzz of drones or the clank of boots echoing from the platforms above. Her blood soaked into his jumpsuit, warm and sticky, and her breath came in shallow gasps against his neck. Stay with me, badass, he muttered, his voice tight. I didn't sign up for this just to carry a corpse. She growled faintly, her claws twitching against his chest, and Jack forced a grin. That's the spirit. Keep growling. Means you're still kicking. The terrain shifted underfoot, quartz slabs giving way to a snarl of neon vines and jagged outcrops, the jungle fighting back against their intrusion. Lightning cracked overhead, the pulsar's wild flares cutting through the haze, and a vine snapped at Jack's leg, its purple tip grazing his calf. He yelped, nearly dropping Xyrithra, but her tail, weak but stubborn, coiled around his waist, steadying him. This place is a freaking death trap, he grumbled, kicking the vine away. Remind me why I didn't crash on a beach planet with cocktails? Xyrithra's head lolled against his shoulder, her silver hair tangling in his face, her amber eyes half-lidded but fierce. Find cover, she rasped, her voice rough with pain. Jack nodded, scanning the mist for anything that wasn't a death trap. His scanner beeped weakly, its screen a mess of red blips, and he muttered, yeah, I get it. We're screwed. But then he saw it, a low, jagged outcrop, half hidden by vines, its base hollowed out into a shallow den. Bingo, he said, hauling her toward it. Not exactly 5-star, but it'll do. He ducked under the vines, dragging Xyrithra into the den, and collapsed against the crystal wall, her body slumping beside him. The space was tight, barely enough room for two, and the air hummed with the jungle's static buzz. Jack fumbled with his pack, pulling out a crumpled medkit, and turned to her. All right, let's patch you up, he said, his hands shaking slightly. No offense, but you're bleeding all over my best outfit. She huffed, a weak, amused sound, and shifted, her good arm bracing against the wall. The plasma dart had grazed her shoulder, leaving a jagged gash that oozed dark blood, staining her silk dress. Jack tore open a sealant patch, his fingers brushing her skin, slick, warm, and glistening even in the dim light. Hold still, he said, pressing the patch over the wound. She flinched, her claws digging into his arm, and Jack winced but didn't pull back. Easy, Tiger, he muttered. I'm not the enemy here. Her amber eyes met his, smoldering despite the pain, and she growled, Fool, you fight. For me. The words hit him like a punch, raw and real, and Jack swallowed, nodding. Yeah, guess I do. The drone's buzz grew louder, their red lights flickering through the vines, and Jack tensed, his scanner beeping a frantic warning. They're close, he whispered, peering out. Too close. Xyrithra tried to stand, her tail flicking, but her legs buckled, and Jack caught her. Barely. Whoa, badass, sit down, he said, easing her back. You're in no shape to claw anything right now. She snarled, defiant, but didn't fight him, her weight sagging against his side. That's when the vines parted. A Novacore outpost loomed in the fog, a squat metal bunker bristling with antennas and guarded by two mercs in black armor. Jack's stomach dropped. "Oh hell," he muttered. "That's their base camp. We're practically in their lap." Xyrethra's ears twitched, her claws flexing weakly. "Sabotage," she said, her voice a strained growl. "Break them." Jack blinked, then grinned, a wild, reckless edge to it. "You're insane. I love it. Let's blow something up." He rummaged through his pack, pulling out a pair of EMP charges, small, jury-rigged from his ship's wreckage, but potent. "These'll fry their tech," he said, showing her. "Drones, comms, maybe even their coffee maker. We just need a distraction." Xyrethra's lips twitched, almost a smirk, and she pushed herself up, her good arm trembling. Distract," she said, and before Jack could stop her, she staggered to the den's edge, her silhouette glowing faintly in the mist. She moved, slow, deliberate, a predator playing wounded prey. Her hips swayed, her silk dress clinging tight, and she let out a low, guttural growl that echoed through the abyss. The mercs snapped to attention, rifles rising, but their eyes lingered, her curves, her grace a hypnotic blur against the neon haze. Jack muttered, "Holy crap, she's a one-woman show," and slipped out, crouching low as he circled toward the outpost. Xyrethra stepped into the open, her tail flicking, her claws gleaming as she faced the mercs. "Come," she snarled, her voice rough but commanding, and they hesitated, long enough for her to lunge. She tackled one, her thighs clamping around his neck, her body twisting as she drove him to the ground with a thud. The second merc fired, a plasma bolt sizzling past her, and Jack sprinted, slamming an EMP charge onto the bunker's power node. "Eat this, assholes," he hissed, arming it with a flick. The charge beeped, a soft hum building, and Jack spun, just in time to see Xyrethra stagger, the second merc's rifle but clipping her wounded shoulder. She roared, faltering, and Jack shouted, "Hang on." He bolted toward her, the EMP's hum rising, but the merc turned, aiming at him. Instinct kicked in, Jack dove, tackling Xyrethra out of the line of fire, and they hit the quartz hard, rolling into a tangle of vines. Her body crashed atop his, a sudden, brutal weight that knocked the air from him. Her hips slammed into his, grinding down with a force that made his head spin. Her thighs, slick, powerful, straddled his waist, pinning him, while her claws raked his shoulders, digging deep as she braced herself. Her bust pressed hard against his chest, the wet silk sliding over him, and her tail whipped around his leg, the glowing tip pressing tight into his thigh with a possessive, desperate grip. The heat of her was searing, wild, trembling, alive, and Jack's breath caught, a raw, dizzying rush flooding his senses. Her silver hair spilled over his face, her lips hovering inches from his, her breath hot and ragged. "You, reckless," she growled, her voice thick with pain and fire, and her claws tightened, scraping his skin with a sting that blurred into want. Jack gasped, his hands gripping her hips, fingers sinking into the slippery silk. "Yeah," he panted, "reckless is my brand. You good?" Her amber eyes burned into his, fierce and unguarded, and she shifted, her hips pressing harder, her tail sliding higher, the pressure bold and dangerous, teetering on the edge of overwhelming. "Good enough," she rasped, her lips brushing his jaw. Not a kiss, but close enough to make his pulse hammer. The EMP detonated, a sharp crack followed by a wave of static, and the outpost's lights flickered, then died. Drones spiraled from the sky, crashing into the abyss, and the mercs shouted, their comms crackling into silence. Jack rolled Xyrethra off him, careful of her wound, and hauled her up, his arm tight around her waist. "One down," he said, breathless, "a million to go. Let's move before they reboot." She leaned into him, her curves pressing into his side, her tail brushing his leg with every step. "You fight well?" she said, her voice faint but warm, and Jack chuckled, shaky. "Yeah, well, I got a badass partner." Keeps me motivated. They stumbled forward, the fog swallowing the outpost's chaos, but the clank of boots rallied in the distance. More mercs, regrouping, their shouts cutting through the mist. Jack's scanner beeped, its screen flickering back to life, and he glanced at Zyrethra, her blood still warm on his hands as they pushed deeper into the jungle's glow. Jack half-carried Zyrethra through the thickening fog of the ether abyss, her blood-slicked arm draped over his shoulder, her breath hot and ragged against his neck. The jungle pulsed around them, neon vines twitching, amber rivers glowing faintly below, and the clank of Novacore boots echoed in the distance, relentless despite the EMP's chaos. His jumpsuit was a mess, soaked with her blood and his sweat, and his scanner beeped weakly, its screen flickering with too many blips to count. "Okay," he muttered, adjusting his grip on her waist. "We've pissed them off good. Now what? Run forever or fight like lunatics?" Zyrethra growled, low and pained, her indigo tail brushing his leg as she leaned harder into him. Her silk dress clung to her curves, stained dark at the shoulder, but her amber eyes still burned, fierce and unbroken. "Fight," she rasped, her claws flexing against his chest. "In them." Jack chuckled, shaky but genuine. "You're a terrible influence, you know that? I was a nice, quiet scientist before you started throwing me into war zones." She huffed, a faint, amused sound, and Jack felt her weight shift, her trust anchoring him even as her strength faded. The terrain climbed, the floating platforms giving way to a steep, crystalline ridge. The Pulsar Crown, Zyrethra had called it, a hidden plateau atop Zytherian. 9 where the jungle's glow softened into amber pools and towering crystal spires. The air vibrated here, a deep, rhythmic hum like the planet's heartbeat, and the fog thinned, revealing a natural fortress of jagged quartz and curling vines. "This it?" Jack asked, easing her down against the spire, her back sliding against the smooth crystal. She nodded, her silver hair spilling over her shoulders, the peony clip glinting in the pulsar's light. "Safe," she said. "Strong. We strike from here." Jack dropped his pack, wiping sweat from his brow. "Strike, huh? I like the sound of that. Let's give Novacore a farewell party they'll never forget." He rummaged through his gear. EMP charges gone, but he had a signal beacon, a few thermal flares, and a busted comms unit he'd salvaged from the wreck. "Junkyard special," he muttered, cracking the comms open. "If I can hack their channel, maybe fake a distress call, lure the big fish right to us." Zyrethra watched him, her tail flicking, and murmured, "Smart fool." Jack grinned. "That's me. Brains and bad decisions in one messy package." He worked fast, his fingers prying wires and tweaking circuits, the hum of the crown steadying his nerves. Zyrethra pushed herself up, wincing, and staggered to a nearby pool, dipping her claws into the amber liquid. She smeared it over her wound, the glow seeping into her skin, and Jack raised an eyebrow. "Magic healing juice?" he asked. She smirked, barely, and said, "Old way. Strength." Her arm steadied, the trembling easing, and Jack nodded, impressed. "Handy. Wish I had some for my dignity." The comms unit crackled to life, spitting static, and Jack patched into Novacore's frequency, his voice dropping to a panicked rasp. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Recon Unit 7. We're under attack. Hostile fauna. Coordinates locked at the crown. Send the main ship now." He cut the signal, tossing the unit aside, and grinned at Zyrethra. "Hook, line, and sinker. They'll come running." She tilted her head, her amber eyes glinting. "You trick well." Jack winked. "It's a gift." They didn't have to wait long. The fog churned, a low rumble building as a shadow loomed. A Novacore dropship, sleek and bristling with guns, descending toward the plateau. Jack's stomach flipped. "Okay," he said. "That's bigger than I expected. Hope you've got a plan B, because mine's mostly swearing and running." Zyrethra stood, steadier now, and sliced her claw across her palm, letting blood drip onto the quartz. The vines around them shivered, curling tighter, and the spires hummed louder, their glow flaring. Jungle fights, she said, fierce. For us. The ship landed with a thud, its ramp slamming down, disgorging a dozen mercs in black armor and a towering mech. 8 feet of steel and plasma cannons, its red optics scanning the crown. Jack whistled. Overkill much? They really want you. Zyrethra snarled, her tail lashing, and darted forward, her silhouette a blur against the amber pools. She hit the first merc like a storm, her claws rending armor, her thighs clamping his chest as she flipped him into a spire with a crack. Jack muttered, "Damn, she's a force," and scrambled for his flares, lighting one and chucking it into the vines. The flares sparked, igniting a neon blaze that spread fast, the vines thrashing and snapping at the mercs. Lightning cracked, the pulsar's flare amplifying the chaos, and Jack jury-rigged his last thermal flare into a makeshift bomb, wiring it to the beacon. "Come on, you piece of crap," he hissed, arming it. The mech turned, its cannon whirring, and fired, a plasma bolt that shattered a spire inches from Zyrethra. She roared, dodging, but her wounded arm slowed her, and Jack shouted, "Heads up!" He threw the flare bomb, aiming for the mech's legs, but a merc intercepted, tackling him mid-throw. The bomb skidded, sparking, and Jack hit the quartz hard, the merc's armored weight pinning him. "Get off, he grunted, but Zyrethra was there in a flash, her body slamming the merc off him with a feral snarl. They rolled, a tangle of limbs and fury, and she landed atop Jack, her weight crashing down like a tidal wave. Her hips slammed into his, grinding hard, the force knocking the breath from him. Her thighs, slick, powerful, straddled his waist, clamping tight, while her claws dug into his shoulders, pinning him to the quartz with a scrape that stung and thrilled. Her bust pressed against his chest, the wet silk sliding over him, and her tail whipped around his leg, the glowing tip pressing firm into his thigh with a possessive, desperate grip. The heat of her was searing, wild, trembling, alive, and Jack's senses drowned in her. Her scent, her weight, the raw intensity of her touch. Her silver hair curtained his face, her lips hovering inches from his, her breath hot and ragged. "You insane," she growled, her voice thick with fire, and her claws tightened, drawing faint lines of heat on his skin. Jack gasped, his hands gripping her hips, fingers sinking into the slippery silk. "Yeah," he panted, "insane's my specialty. You okay?" Her amber eyes burned into his, fierce and unguarded, and she shifted, her hips pressing harder, her tail sliding higher, the pressure bold and dangerous, teetering on the edge of too much. "Alive," she rasped, her lips brushing his cheek. Not a kiss, but close enough to make his pulse race. The flare bomb sparked nearby, a warning beep cutting through the haze, and Jack muttered, "We've got seconds." She rolled off him, her tail brushing his leg as she sprang up, and Jack scrambled to his feet, grabbing the beacon. The mech lumbered closer, its cannon charging, but the vines, roused by Zyrethra's blood, lashed out, tangling its legs. Jack armed the bomb fully, chucking it under the mech's chassis. "Eat this, tin can," he yelled, diving for cover as it detonated, a sharp boom followed by a surge of heat and sparks. The mech staggered, circuits frying, and crashed into the quartz, its red optics dimming. Zyrethra grabbed his arm, pulling him behind a spire as the mercs rallied, their shouts rising over the chaos. "More," she said, her voice steady now, her claws gleaming with amber glow. Jack nodded, panting, his hands still tingling from her touch. "Yeah, they're pissed. Let's keep imbus." The dropship's engines roared, its guns swiveling, and Jack ducked low, dragging his pack with him as they slipped deeper into the crown's glow, the vines curling protectively around them. Jack crouched behind the crystal spire, his chest heaving, Zyrethra's amber-streaked claws glinting beside him as the pulsar crown thrummed with life. The Nova Corps dropship loomed in the fog, its engines roaring, its guns swiveling with mechanical precision. The vines, roused by Zyrethra's blood, lashed at the wreckage of the mech, their neon tips curling around twisted metal. But the mercs were regrouping, their shouts sharp and furious over the jungle's hum. Jack wiped sweat from his brow, his jumpsuit torn and bloodied, and muttered, "Okay, we've trashed their toy. Now what? Dance with the ship or run screaming?" Xyrethra's amber eyes flicked to him, fierce and steady despite the gash on her shoulder. Her silk dress clung tight, stained with blood and amber glow, outlining every curve. Wide hips, full bust, the narrow dip of her waist. Her silver hair swayed, the peony clip glinting, and her indigo tail flicked with restless energy. "No run," she growled, her voice rough but firm. "Break them. All." Jack grinned, a wild edge to it. "You're a one-track mind, badass. Guess I'm along for the ride. Hope it's got a happy ending." The dropship's ramp shuddered, disgorging more mercs. 6, maybe 8, their black armor glinting as they fanned out, rifles raised. Jack peeked from behind the spire, his scanner buzzing in his pocket, and hissed, "They're not quitting. Gotta admire the dedication, even if it's to kill us." Xyrethra's claws flexed, her tail brushing his leg, and she pointed to a cluster of amber pools glowing like liquid suns. "Trap," she said sharp. "There." Jack followed her gaze. Vines coiled thick around the pools, their neon tips twitching, ready to strike. "Oh," he said, nodding. "Sneaky. I like it." He grabbed a jagged quartz shard from the ground, chucking it toward the pools. It splashed into the amber, sparking a flare of light, and the vines erupted, lashing out, snapping at the air. The mercs froze, then scattered, their shouts turning to curses as the jungle fought back. Xyrethra darted forward, her silhouette a blur against the glow, and Jack followed, his boots skidding on the quartz. "Time to party," he yelled, snagging a thermal flare from his pack and lighting it mid-stride. She hit the first merc like a storm, her claws rending armor, her thighs clamping his waist as she flung him into a pool with a splash. Jack tossed the flare, its red glow arcing toward a second merc, who dove aside, straight into a vine that wrapped his legs and yanked him screaming into the mist. "Bullseye!" Jack hooped, but the dropship's guns whirred, a plasma bolt sizzling past his head, shattering a spire into glowing shards. "Okay, less cheering, more not dying," he muttered, ducking low. Xyrethra spun, her tail whipping, and tackled another merc, her body twisting as she drove him down. But the ship's cannon locked on, its hum rising, and Jack shouted, "Move!" He sprinted toward her, his flare spent, and grabbed her arm. Too late. The bolt fired, a searing wave of heat, and Xyrethra shoved him aside, her strength flaring despite her wound. They crashed into a shallow amber pool, the liquid splashing hot around them, and she landed atop him, her weight a sudden, brutal force. Her hips slammed into his, grinding hard, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. Her thighs, slick, powerful, straddled his waist, clamping tight, while her claws dug in his chest, scraping through fabric to sting his skin. Her bust pressed against him, the wet silk sliding over his jumpsuit, and her tail coiled around his leg, the glowing tip pressing firm into his thigh with a possessive, desperate grip that sent a jolt of raw heat through him. The amber soaked them, warm and sticky, amplifying every sensation, her heat, her weight, the fierce tremble of her frame. Her silver hair curtained his face, dripping amber, her lips hovering inches from his, her breath hot and ragged. "You fool," she growled, her voice thick with fire and strain, and her claws tightened, drawing faint lines of pain and one across his skin. Jack gasped, his hands gripping her hips, fingers sinking into the slippery silk, the feel of her firm curves making his pulse hammer. "Yeah," he panted, "fool who keeps saving your ass. You're welcome." Her amber eyes burned into his, fierce and unguarded, and she shifted, her hips pressing harder, her tail sliding higher, the pressure bold and dangerous, teetering on the edge of overwhelming. "Alive, because you," she rasped, her lips brushing his jaw. Not a kiss, but close enough to make his head spin. The ship's cannon hummed again, a warning, and Jack muttered, Gotta move, badass. She rolled off him, her tail brushing his leg as she sprang up, amber dripping from her skin. Jack scrambled to his feet, the pool sloshing around his boots, and grabbed his pack, fishing out the signal beacon, still sparking from the EMP chaos. One last trick, he said, tweaking its circuits. Overload their sensors, blind him. Xyrethra nodded, her claws gleaming, and darted toward the ship, her silhouette hypnotic against the pulsar's glow. Jack armed the beacon, chucking it toward the ramp. Its red light pulsed wild, a shrieking signal that scrambled the Merc's comms. The ship's guns faltered, swiveling erratically, and Xyrethra seized the chaos. She leapt onto the ramp, her claws slashing an antenna array, sparks flying. Jack followed, ducking a wild shot from a Merc, and slid under the ship's hull, planting his last thermal flare against a fuel line. "Here's your eviction notice," he hissed, lighting it. The flare sparked, a slow burn, and he rolled out shouting, "Zyra, haul ass." She vaulted off the ramp, landing beside him as the flare ignited, a low hump that erupted into a fireball, the ship's engines choking on flame and smoke. The Mercs scattered, some diving into the vines, others retreating to the burning wreck, their shouts drowned by the jungle's roar. Xyrethra grabbed Jack's arm, pulling him behind a spire as the ship shuddered, its hull cracking. "Done," she said, her voice steady now, her amber eyes glinting with triumph. Jack panted, grinning. "Yeah, with the apex predators now. Suck it, Nova Corps." She smirked, full on this time, and leaned into him, her shoulder brushing his, her tail flicking against his leg. The vines curled tighter, reclaiming the wreckage, and the pulsar flared overhead, casting wild shadows across the crown. Jack slumped against the spire, catching his breath, his hand brushing hers, sticky with amber and blood, but warm. "Guess they're pulling out," he said, nodding at the ship's dying glow. Blind, stumbling, and pissed. Xyrethra's claws traced the quartz beside him, her posture easing. "Jungle." "Ours," she said, soft but firm, and Jack nodded, his grin softening. "Yeah, ours." They stood there a moment, the chaos fading, the hum of the crown steadying around them. Jack rummaged in his pack, pulling out a cracked canteen, and took a swig, offering it to her. She sniffed it, then drank, amber dripping from her lips, and handed it back. "What now?" he asked, wiping his mouth. She pointed to a flat outcrop nearby, its surface smooth and glowing. "Claim," she said, her tail brushing his leg again, and Jack followed her gaze, the weight of her words sinking in as they stepped toward it, the jungle's glow pulsing brighter around them. Jack stood beside Xyrethra on the flat outcrop of the pulsar crown, the amber pools casting a warm, liquid glow across the quartz beneath their feet. The Nova Corps dropship smoldered in the distance, its hull a twisted wreck swallowed by the jungle's neon vines, the last Merc's shouts fading into the fog. The air hummed with the planet's heartbeat, steady and alive, and the pulsar flared overhead, painting the spires in wild streaks of green and gold. Jack's jumpsuit hung in tatters, his hands still sticky with amber and blood, but he grinned, wild and unbroken. "Well," he said, nudging Xyrethra with his elbow, "we kicked their asses. Guess we're the landlords now." Xyrethra's amber eyes glinted, her silver hair swaying as she turned to him, the peony clip catching the light. Her silk dress, torn at the shoulder, stained with blood and amber, clung to her curves, outlining her fierce, untamed beauty. Her indigo tail flicked, brushing his leg, and she stepped closer, her claws tracing the quartz with a soft scrape. "Claim," she said again, her voice low and firm, carrying a weight that made Jack's chest tighten. He nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah, ours. No more running." She knelt, her tail curling around her legs, and pressed her palm to the outcrop, smearing a thin line of her blood across it. The quartz pulsed, a faint ripple of light spreading outward, and the vines around them shivered, curling tighter as if sealing the pact. Jack watched, his breath catching. "That's badass," he said, crouching beside her. "What's it mean?" She glanced at him, her double pupils narrowing, and said, "Home. Us." The simplicity of it hit him like a punch, raw, real, and heavier than any victory. He pulled a cracked shard from his pack, the one she'd left as a gift days ago, and etched their names into the quartz with a jagged tip. Jack plus Syra. Crude, shaky, but theirs. "There," he said, tossing the shard aside. "Official. Nota que box." Her lips twitched, almost a smile, and she stood, her claws gleaming as she offered him a hand. He took it, her grip strong and warm, and hauled himself up, their shoulders brushing as they faced the glowing expanse of the crown. The jungle settled around them, the hums softening, but Jack's mind buzzed. "Gotta make this place livable," he said, rubbing his hands together. "Solar array for power. Maybe a roof, keep the lightning from frying us." Zyrethra tilted her head, her tail flicking. "Roof?" she echoed, puzzled, and Jack laughed, a bright, reckless sound. "Stick with me, badass. I'll show you the wonders of human ingenuity, like not getting rained on." She huffed, amused, and stepped closer, her hip grazing his, sending a flicker of heat through him. They worked, Jack rigging a makeshift solar panel from ship debris, Zyrethra weaving vines into a crude canopy. The pulsar flared again, its light glinting off her skin, and Jack paused, watching her move, graceful, fierce, alive. "Never thought I'd build a house with an alien goddess," he muttered, half to himself. She caught his eye, her amber gaze smoldering, and said, "Never thought I'd made a clumsy fool." Jack's jaw dropped, then he laughed, loud and free. "Mate, huh? Moving fast, are we?" She smirked, full on this time, and tossed a vine at his head, which he ducked, grinning. The canopy took shape, a patchwork of neon and quartz, and Jack stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. "Not bad," he said, hands on his hips. "Home sweet home, assuming home comes with killer vines and a sexy roommate." Zyrethra prowled toward him, her tail swaying, and before he could quip again, she grabbed his shoulders, pulling him into her with a force that stole his breath. Her body pressed hard against his, her hips digging into his with a fierce, possessive grip. Her thighs, slick, strong, slid against his sides, pinning him as her claws raked his back, scraping through fabric to sting his skin. Her bust crushed into his chest, the wet silk slipping over him, and her tail coiled tight around his waist, the glowing tip pressing firm into his lower spine with a slow, deliberate grind that sent a shockwave of heat through him. Her heat was overwhelming, wild, trembling, triumphant, and Jack's senses drowned in her. Her scent, her weight, the raw intensity of her touch. Her silver hair spilled over his shoulders, her lips grazing his ear, her breath hot and ragged. "Mine," she growled, her voice thick with fire and need, and her claws tightened, drawing faint lines of one across his flesh. Jack gasped, his hands gripping her hips, fingers sinking into the slippery silk, the feel of her firm curves making his pulse race. "Yours," he rasped, voice shaky but sure. "In your mind? Deal." Her amber eyes burned into his, fierce and tender, and she shifted, her hips pressing harder, her tail sliding lower, the pressure bold and dangerous, teetering on the edge of too much. Then she kissed him, slow, possessive, her fangs grazing his lip, her tongue warm and rough against his. The heat of it seared through him, fierce yet tender, sealing their bond in a way words never could. She pulled back, her claws tracing his spine, her tail locking around his waist, and Jack panted, grinning through the days. "Okay," he said, "that's one hell of a housewarming." She smirked, her hand sliding into his, and they turned to the outcrop, the etched names glowing faintly in the amber light. The jungle hummed around them, its glow steady, their sanctuary secure. Days bled into weeks, then months. Jack built a solar array, its panels glinting beside the canopy, and Zyrethra carved a sigil into a spire. Two figures entwined, human and alien, etched with her claw. They sat atop the outcrop one night, the pulsar flaring wild overhead, its auroras dancing across the sky. Jack leaned back, his arm around her, her head resting on his shoulder, her silver hair soft against his neck. "Never thought I'd find home with a sexy alien assassin," he said, his voice soft, unguarded. She smirked, her claws brushing his chest. "Never thought I'd keep a soft skin full." Her tail flicked, coiling around his ankle, and Jack chuckled, squeezing her hand. The air was warm, the amber pools casting a gentle glow across their makeshift den. Jack pointed to the sigil, its lines sharp against the spire. "That's us," he said, his grin widening. "Jack and Zyra, rulers of the glow." She nodded, her amber eyes reflecting the pulsar's light, and leaned into him, her weight steady, grounding. "Rulers," she echoed, her voice a purr, and Jack felt the hum of the crown sync with his pulse. Wild, alive theirs. They sat there, the jungle's glow wrapping around them, the vines curling lazily in the breeze. Jack traced a finger along her arm, her skin warm and slick under his touch, and she growled softly, a sound of contentment. The pulsar flared again, its light washing over the plateau, and Jack tilted his head back, watching the auroras twist. Zyrethra shifted beside him, her tail brushing his leg, and they settled into the quiet, their hands entwined, the glow of their home stretching out into the night.